Military and political analyst from the information resistance group, Oleksandr Kovalenko, is joining our broadcast. Oleksandr, glad to have you with us.
Good afternoon.
In your considered opinion, was the recent Russian drone incident over Vilnius a clear provocation or merely just a coincidental occurrence?
No, I don't think it was a provocation, for one simple. Well, how should I put it? Not exactly a provocation. First of all, it was a Gerbera. It's a decoy drone. Decoy drones like the Gerbera and Parody are extremely vulnerable to electronic warfare. Almost all the drones we see in the reports from the air forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, which are lost by location, are precisely the drones that have been suppressed by electronic warfare systems. And 90% of them are not Shaheed 136s. They are mostly Gerbera and Parody. The Gerbera that we see now in the footage was most likely suppressed somewhere in the Chernihiv or Kiev region. It flew in a northern direction, that is through Belarus. In Belarus, after studying its flight path, they decided not to waste ammunition on it like a missileer to send aircraft to intercept it. And thus, it entered the territory of a Baltic country. So in this case, this is exactly the scenario where the drone was suppressed, it wasn't shot down in Belarus, and it ended up in the territory of a Baltic country. The downside of this whole situation is that it really did travel a significant distance over what for Russia is enemy territory, and it wasn't shot down. So this is exactly the same example as when the Shaheed 136 drones entered Romanian territory into Romanian airspace to carry out strikes on Ismail, for example, or on Reni in the Odessa region. And the Romanian air defense forces did not shoot them down. Even though they had the opportunity, they did not shoot down these drones. This, once again, demonstrates the level of spinelessness, amorphousness, and sluggishness in the response of our Western partners to such threats. It's interesting to wonder how they would react if 7, 8, 10, or 11 Kh-47M2 Kinzhal missiles enter their airspace.
This is the second incident just in July. Do you expect, even if belated, a reaction from Vilnius or, I don't know, from the West in general?
Well, as an option, they might express concern. What else can they do? Launch a preemptive nuclear strike on Moscow? No, of course not. Although they would really like to.
A preemptive nuclear?
But overall, nothing like that will happen.
Okay. They should prepare for similar incidents in the future. In any case, this should somehow serve as a push, meaning it should motivate them to get ready for a repeat of such incidents, so that next time they have a real chance to intercept such drones. This time it was a Gerbera, right? Let's say it's a decoy drone. But next time it could be a Shaheed, God forbid.
And it might not just be a Shaheed, it could be a much more sophisticated target, one that's actually very difficult to intercept, not only with electronic warfare systems, but even with anti-aircraft missile systems. That's precisely why our partners should respond to such incidents in, more appropriate manner. I understand that they live in peacetime, they don't have martial law, and when some small foreign object appears in their airspace, they treat it with caution, wondering, what could this be? What should we do about it? What if it's some small, light aircraft that accidentally flew in from Belarus? And if you shoot it down, some botanist naturalist who is an amateur aviator might die. These thoughts should be completely dismissed and ruled out. Any foreign object in the airspace of countries that currently border Russia as well as Belarus, any foreign object should be regarded as hostile and posing a threat. Otherwise, at some point, as I said, something could indeed fly into the territory of one of the Baltic countries or any other country bordering Russia or Belarus, something that simply cannot be intercepted in a short period of time. In other words, within a matter of minutes, it would simply be impossible. This is the kind of response our partners in the Baltic countries and Eastern Europe, and in fact NATO countries in general, should have.
I didn't mention Shaheeds for nothing when I asked the question, because Russia is apparently expanding the production of those very Shaheeds, the Shaheed production line in Alabuga. There is active construction going on there. And these are various types of pavilions, apparently for different purposes. How serious is this, really? In what way or on what scale can this Shaheed production in Russia now or in the near future take place?
As of today, Russian enterprises Slaba in Tatarstan and Kupol in Izhevsk produce a total of 90 to 100 finished Shaheed 136 units. That's the total combined. So let's round it up. Let's just say 100 units. About the same number of decoy drones as Gerbera and Parodia are being produced. So the daily production capacity is 200 finished units, give or take 10 to 15%. And in the event that new workshops and production facilities are built, and that won't happen tomorrow or in a month or even in 3 months, it will take some time to launch all these production lines. Then of course they will be able to increase output, let's say by about 20 to 30% incremental. And as for what we currently see in Russian propaganda, what they show regarding the Shaheed 136, these large workshops where a large number of kamikaze drones are produced, well, first of all, they're not showing anything new. Again, let me repeat, the total number per day is up to 100 units, both in Izhevsk and in Alabuga. And what Russian propaganda outlets are showing is just a workshop for show. I'll put it this way, that's not a real production facility. So what Zvezda showed they produced the Shaheed 136, all those rows of black drone bodies, the kamikaze drones, with people in white lab coats working on them. That is not an actual production facility. It's just a show-off workshop set up for filming these kinds of segments to scare people and intimidate them with, look how much we're producing. In reality, it's not that much. In fact, it's exactly the amount that the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence HIRMO reported 2 months ago, and which was confirmed by the head of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, Kirill Budanov, that is 90 to 100 units per day. But new workshops and new production lines will allow for an increase of about 20 to 30% at a time. What does 10 to 20% mean? Well, that's about 130 to 150 finished units per day. Taking into account the Herber and the Parody, it could be about the same amount. So by, well, the end of 2025, we could very well see the potential of the Russian occupiers to carry out daily rates in a combined format on a stable daily basis. If we're talking about production potential, that's about 300 to 350 units. With stockpiling, of course, it would be more. But specifically per day, they will be able to produce 300 to 350 units of combined drone components by the end of this year.
There were strikes on Alabuga, and not just once. How effective were these strikes?
All these strikes are effective to a certain extent, but the main thing is to evaluate them correctly. We're saying that Alabuga is being hit. Our long-range drones are striking Alabuga. What kind of warhead do our long-range drones have? Well, for example, it could be a Fab 250 bomb mounted on them, which has a warhead of about 100 kilograms. It could also be an additional specific payload, meaning about another 50 kilograms or so. What does it mean to strike a large industrial facility with a weapon carrying a warhead of 100 to 150 kilograms of explosive? This would be a temporary suspension. If, of course, the strike is a curatella situational halt in production for a day, maybe a bit longer, but it would not be the complete destruction of the facility. To completely destroy the facility, for example, Alabuga and the dome in Izhevsk, would need to be hit by 3 or 4 ballistic missiles with warheads of up to half a ton each. In other words, you need to use a warhead with up to 2 tons of explosives. Roughly speaking, it could be a ballistic missile, a cruise missile, maybe even a Tomahawk. You can imagine any number of possibilities. But it really needs to be a powerful warhead, one that can not only break through layered air defenses at once, but also deliver a simultaneous strike on a specific target. Strike drones are doing their best to carry out their missions within their capabilities. But even so, this firepower is still not enough to completely and entirely halt production. It's enough to pause or slow things down, but not to completely wipe them out.
Well, then we'll be waiting for new reports from Tatarstan. The situation on the battlefield, the situation at the front, there are, and I say this very cautiously, certain achievements by Ukraine's defense forces in the Sumy direction, but there is also some advance by the occupiers in the Zaporizhia direction. Please give your assessment of the situation.
Well, to be honest, the Zaporizhia direction doesn't worry me as much as, for example, the Novopavlivka direction.
Why not the Novopavlivka direction?
In Zaporizhia direction, we are currently seeing tactical level advances by Russian units, which will be stopped. And, well, everything has its own timing. They're reaching certain lines or positions will happen in due course. But in the Novopavlivka direction, they continue to expand their zone of control, which is now almost reaching the left bank of the Volcha and Voronaya rivers. And that is a serious problem. The problem lies in the fact that essentially this means Russian troops are advancing into the Zaporizhia region towards the Huliaipol direction and into the Dnipropetrovsk region. It is precisely here that they will enter the Dnipropetrovsk region and not in the area where many feared, where the 90th Tank Division was operating, the Kurakhove salient, where they might break through via Kotlyarivka, Udakhne, Novoleksandrivka, and Novosergiivka along the Solina River. No, nothing of the sort. In fact, the defense is holding very well there. But in the Novopavlivka direction, the defense, to put it mildly, leaves much to be desired for now. And recently, there has already been information that they have reached Malivka. And going forward, this is practically an entry into the Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions with the formation of control zones and flanks. As for the Russians' current advance in the area of Kamyansky and Plavny towards Stepnohirsk, all of that will be stopped precisely in the Stepnohirsk area. This is due to the fact that it is a very difficult area for conducting a combined arms offensive operation, and taking into account the terrain and landscape features, and also considering that one combined arms army, the 58th, is concentrated in this direction. Even though the 58th combined arms army within the Russian occupation forces is the largest in terms of manpower, it is still not enough to pursue any combined arms operational or tactical priorities of significance in this direction. But on the Novopavlivka axis, there are 4 units from 4 combined arms armies and 1 army corps reinforced with attached units, totaling up to 100,000 personnel. This is a serious problem that could arise and develop in the near future, specifically on this section of the front.
So, am I correct in understanding that, for example, the threat of the Russians being able to use tube artillery to shell the city of Zaporizhia is still not relevant at this stage?
And before this, they didn't have that capability. Previously, they did not launch multiple rocket systems at Zaporizhia. For example, they didn't shell it with Smerch as one option. In other words, there was no terror campaign in Zaporizhia. Yes, in Zaporizhia, the main threat right now is the terrorizing of the civilian population, just like in Kharkiv and just like in Sumy and just like in Kherson. The difference is that in Kherson, FPV drones are hitting the city, while in Zaporizhia, FPV drones haven't arrived yet. So the main threat is the terrorizing of the civilian population. But if we are talking about general military matters like advances, capturing territory, or reaching the outskirts of the regional center, then no. I repeat, if we compare the Zaporizhia direction, the Orekhiv direction, and the Huliaipol direction with the Novopavlivka direction, then the Novopavlivka direction simultaneously poses a threat to both Zaporizhia and the Dnipropetrovsk region at the same time. And here, a question arises. The 58th Combined Arms Army, which after some time will run into Stepnohirsk and will lose a large number of personnel in the Stepnohirsk area without achieving any operational tactical results, except for terrorizing the civilian population in Zaporizhia itself. Is this a greater threat than, for example, Russian troops advancing into two regions at once and forming corresponding flanks and directions of attack, which is still an open question whether they can be stopped, and which could later create a serious problem for the Huliaipol direction, the Orikhiv direction, and so on. It seems to me that the real problem right now is precisely in the Novopavlivka direction rather than in the area of Stepnohirsk. And there are people there who can deal with that issue. But the fact that in the Novopavlivka direction, after 3 months, the issue of Russian advances and the rapid expansion of their control zones in terms of area still hasn't been resolved, I think that's a much more pressing task.
By the way, you mentioned Russian losses. And can these losses once again be made up by soldiers sent by Kim Jong-un? This topic has been discussed for more than a day now.
Yes, that's a very interesting point, because North Korean troops until recently, where did they mostly take part? On the territory of the Russian Federation in battles in the Kursk region. So basically, if you look at it this way, they did not enter Ukrainian territory. They did not formally or legally take part in the invasion of Ukraine. They participated in certain types of defensive actions by the Russian army on its own territory. So to say that North Korea sent its regular military personnel for a direct invasion of Ukraine would be legally incorrect. That North Korea is helping Russia in the war against Ukraine is absolutely and completely. But if North Korean military personnel, specifically regular troops, appear on Ukrainian territory, it will be a very interesting precedent where Ukraine at the diplomatic level could officially begin to call not just for volunteers wishing to take part in the war against Russia to defend Ukraine from Russian aggression, but could directly appeal to ministries of defense to provide regular military personnel for, say, aviation, air defense systems, artillery specialists, and so on and so forth. In other words, this is a truly dangerous kind of Pandora's box that Vladimir Putin might deliberately open in his relentless pursuit of his elusive, deeply revanchist and aggressively expansionist goals. At the same time, he could open a Pandora's box that would allow Ukraine, on a legal basis, to fully justify requesting regular military personnel from other countries to be deployed on its territory. And where would they show up? Well, I think wherever it would be most, if the Russian command and the command of the Korean National Army agreed to this, if they agreed to take part in active combat operations on Ukrainian territory, then it could be any sector. But in my opinion, the most logical place would be the Kupiansk direction. Not even the Sumy region, not even the Volchansk direction. It is specifically the Kupiansk direction that would be the most suitable for deploying North Korean troops to begin assault operations, for example, on the right bank Kupiansk. That's just my opinion. And where else might they appear? They could even show up in the Kherson region. That, of course, is up to Russian command and their perspective. But the most logical place for them to appear would be in the Kupiansk direction.
But again, going back to what you said, this takes the war to a completely new level, or rather it changes how other countries view this war, Russia's war against Ukraine, raising it to a new level. Okay, we'll keep following how things develop. Alexander, thank you very much. Oleksandr Kovalenko, a military and political analyst from the Information Resistance Group, joined our broadcast. Thank you.
All the best.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.